Greetings, Commanders, Cerebrats, and Executors.
Not enough minerals.
In the Improving at StarCraft subseries, we are going to be talking about what to focus on, what subjects are most important to get better at playing StarCraft.
Not enough
And I'm
minerals.
starting out that subseries with this video where we will talk about Macro, which is probably the single most important area that you need to get good at to start excelling at
Not enough
StarCraft.
minerals.
So what's Macro? Macro, short for macro management, refers to handling the large-scale aspects of StarCraft, making your buildings, creating your combat units, gathering and using your resources. And the reason macro is really important, even though none of it is about how you fight the enemy, is because the fact is, in StarCraft, generally, larger, more expensive armies are more powerful and will win fights versus smaller and weaker armies, versus smaller and cheaper armies. So if you want to win the game, one of the best ways to do that is to make sure you have a large army and you are pumping a lot of resources into building that large army. And that means you need to handle your resources. The most concise description of what we're trying to do with macro is the idea that if you mine as many resources as you can, and then you spend as many resources as you can, then your army is as big and powerful as it can possibly be. And big, powerful armies win games. So, what you really need to focus on is how do I mine as many resources as possible, and how do I spend as many resources as possible. To be mining as many resources as possible, the first thing we need to do is make sure we have a lot of workers. Workers are how you gather resources. More workers directly means you will have more resources available.
Not enough minerals.
So if you are a Protoss or a Terran, the races whose workers are built out of their main base structure, one by one, you always want your main base structure to be building workers continuously all the time. You can see if you watch my command center in this game, you will see I basically never stop making more SCVs until I get into the late game and I have a whole lot of workers, about 60 to 70, and I've made all the workers I want for the whole game. But until that point, I'm never going to stop making workers, if I can avoid it. So the first thing you need to practice is always keep your command center or nexus busy building more workers. As a Zerg, you also, of course, want to make as many workers as you can. But the rules for exactly when you can make those workers are a little more complicated, because Zerg production builds both your combat units and your
Not enough minerals.
workers. The second thing you need to do, in order to gather as many resources as possible, is to continue to take bases. And when I say base, what I mean is a command center, nexus, or hatchery next to a bunch of minerals and a gas geyser, so that you can send a lot of workers there to be mining at that location. I'm not going to take a base just yet, because I do need to deal with the enemy's attacks that will be coming. But I am going to take a base as soon as it is safe for me to do that. Because if you have lots of command centers or hatcheries or nexuses, and they all have a lot of workers at them mining the resources that are available there, then you are going to have more total resources coming in. So you need to take as many bases as you can safely get away with. And then when you have those extra bases, you want those other command centers or nexuses to also be building lots of workers.
Not enough
Because
minerals.
if you don't, you could have been making more workers than you did, and now your economy is weaker than it could have been.
Not enough minerals. Not enough minerals.
So, if we are already making as many workers as we can, and we are repeatedly expanding to mine at as many new locations as possible, then we're going to be gathering a lot of resources. And that's good. But now comes the second part of macro, and that is spend as much as you can. And this one's a little trickier. Because a lot of players who are new to StarCraft will quite easily understand that you need to gather a lot of resources and it's good to have a lot of minerals and gas. But it's often harder for players to wrap their heads around the fact that you also want to spend your resources as fast as possible. While you do want to be gathering a lot of resources, you don't want those resources to be sticking around in your bank up in the top right of the screen. You don't want that number up the top right to be a large number. You want that to be a very small number because you want to be spending your resources as soon as you gather them. So this is a concept that a lot of new players have some trouble with. Why is it so important that you don't let that number in the top right become a big number? Well, consider this. At some point I expect to be attacked by the enemy. I might move out and have a look around, because the enemy hasn't attacked me yet. But suppose I was attacked by the enemy at this point, and I lost the fight. The enemy army arrived, it did a bunch of damage, it destroyed all my combat units, and now I'm in a bad position. I have no army, and the enemy is about to move on and destroy a lot of my important infrastructure. But when that fight happened, imagine that I had 2,000 minerals in my bank in the top right. And you might say, hey, that's good. It's great to have 2,000 minerals. That means you have a lot of potential to build new things later on in the game. But if I lost a fight and I had 2,000 minerals in my bank when I lost that fight, well, think about how many combat units you can buy with 2,000 minerals. 2,000 minerals is 40 Marines. That is a lot of Marines. That's a lot of army. That's a lot of combat power. Oh no, the enemy just hadn't attacked me yet, so they are going to come and attack me eventually. So if I had a lot of resources in my bank, but I wasn't spending those resources, that's a lot of combat power. 2,000 minerals, 40 Marines, that would have made a big difference in the fight if I already had spent that 2,000 minerals and actually had 40 extra Marines when I took the fight. That's probably enough of a difference that I'll win the fight instead of lose the fight. And now I'm actually in a much better position if I've managed to spend my resources and my army is correspondingly larger. Because now, I've won a fight, I still have some units left over from winning that fight, the enemy doesn't have their army anymore, and I might be able to move on and actually attack the enemy sometime soon. So it's really important to spend your resources as soon as you can. It can be the difference between winning and losing fights, especially if the enemy attacks you. So, if we've established that it's really important to spend your resources as soon as possible to keep this number low, then how do we actually go about doing that? Well, first step is always keep your production buildings busy. These are my barracks, these are what I'm using to make my combat units. You'll notice the lights on them are usually flashing. I'm trying to keep these busy as much as possible. I'm trying to make sure they're always making combat units so that my unit count continues to go up, my army's always getting bigger over time. Keep your production buildings busy building combat units as much as you can. Second step, don't get supply blocked. As we talked about in the Details of StarCraft sub-series, this top right number, your supply count, shows how much supply you have to spare, and you can't build a unit if you haven't got enough supply for it. You don't want to be in that situation where you haven't got enough supply to build more units, because when you get supply blocked, when your available supply is equal to your current maximum supply and you can't build more, well, your army cannot get bigger. You are completely prevented from your army getting bigger until you fix that situation. There's no way that you can get more access to units until another one of your supply depots or command centers or pylons or nexuses or overlords, if you're a Zerg player, finishes. So you always want to be building those things that increase your supply early. You don't want to be getting into situations where you haven't got enough spare supply to build more units, and then you just have to wait. So keep throwing down depots, pylons, overlords, whatever it is that your race needs, to make sure that they can always keep increasing the size of their army. And the third and last key point in macroing well, in spending your resources as soon as possible, is if you can't spend all the resources you have with the production structures you've got, if your production structures are busy, if they're always making units, and yet you still have a lot of resources in the top right that you're not managing to spend, then add more production structures. If you've been watching this game, I started out with 1 barracks, then I added a second, so I had 2, and I've kept adding on more barracks slowly over time. I now have 6 barracks. That's because, as the game's gone on, I have gained access to more resources. My total income has gotten larger. And that means that I can afford to produce more units at a time because I have more income. So I've added on more barracks to be able to keep pace with my increasing income so that I can still spend all my money as soon as it is gathered. So let me just talk through the key principles of macro one more time. I've already covered them all, but let's state them again as a recap. If you mine as much as you can and spend as much as you can, then your army is as big as it can possibly be, and that is desirable. That's what you want. As you see here, my army won the fight against the enemy army, and I basically didn't pay attention to the fight, because my army was much bigger and stronger than the enemy's. I just needed to tell them to go attack, and the units handled the rest. If you mine as much as you can and spend as much as you can, your army is as big as it can possibly be. So how do you mine as much as you can? How do you spend as much as you can? Well, to mine as much as you can, keep your buildings producing workers, keep your main base structures, your command center, nexus, hatchery, producing workers as much as possible. Always keep this building busy, making more workers until you get to the point that you have all the workers you want for the whole game. And get those workers mining as soon as possible as well. Second, continue to take more bases. I took this expansion down here, and I sent a lot of workers to go mine from it. I've now taken an expansion, a third base over here in the bottom center of the map, and I'm going to send more workers to go mine from it, because I already have a lot of workers available to do that resource gathering that I can send for those jobs. And then you want to spend as much as you can once you've, in addition to mining as much as you can, because that is how you keep your army large. Mining alone isn't enough. Having a lot of resources in the bank is great, but you need to actually turn those resources into army units so that they can win fights for you. So, to spend resources as much as we can, to spend your resources as fast as possible, keep the production structures you have busy. Make sure they are always building more units for you. And then, continue to add on more supply depots, pylons, or overlords, so that you do not get supply blocked. So you always have the spare supply to continue making more units. And finally, if you are keeping your existing production structures busy and you are adding on more and more supply depots or pylons or overlords, you're making sure you don't get supply blocked, then add on more and more production structures so that you can spend those additional resources. If you have a lot of resources in the bank, like I do right now, I have 2,000 minerals in the bank. I could be spending that. I'm not doing a perfect job. Part of that is because I'm trying to talk about the game while I'm also playing the game at the same time. But I need to be adding on more production structures so that I can be spending those resources I have, which I am trying to do. And we just won the game. So that's macro management. Gather all the resources you can, spend all the resources you can. if you focus on building as many workers as possible, and sending them to mine immediately, continuing to expand to new bases so you can gather resources from more places at once, and then producing as many units as you possibly can, spending your resources as soon as you can rather than letting those resources just accumulate in your bank. If you focus on these things, you will see a significant improvement in your ability to play StarCraft. You'll be able to make large, powerful armies, which will fare a lot better against your opponents.